Greetings and salutations, Greek students. We continue our study of the Greek language by adding the aorist tense. So just as a quick review of verbs, we have, of course, person, first, second, and third person, number, singular and plural. We've talked about the present tense, that o, ace, a, amen, edi, usi. We've talked about the imperfect, that on, s, a, amen, edi, on. We've also talked about the present middle passive, so omai, e, etai, amata, este, antai, as well as the imperfect middle passive, omein, u, eta, amata, este, anta. Now, remember with the imperfect, you have that epsilon prefix, that's sort of this blinking light of, oh, hey, I'm looking at an imperfect. We've also seen the future tense, which the sign of the future is, of course, the sigma, where you have so, se, samen, sedi, susi. We're adding, with this lesson, the aorist tense. So the aorist tense, which combines some of the things we've already seen with the sigma, as well as the forms, some of the forms of the imperfect, as we'll see in a second. So far, we've been entirely in the indicative and the infinitive mood. We won't talk too much about mood for now. We've also talked about tense, where we've talked about the imperfect as something that's happened in the past, the present as something that's happening in the present in this moment right now, and the future as something that hasn't happened yet but will. Or could. And then now we're adding the aorist, which is past. But the other thing we've talked about in addition to tense is verbal aspect. So we talked about the continuous aspect of the imperfect tense and how the imperfect is sort of like this movie, the video clip, right? It's a moving picture that it's describing something as this ongoing activity, right? And the undefined action is more of the Polaroid picture. It's the snapshot. It's the Instagram, right? It's the difference between Instagram and Instagram Live, or just the Instagram picture and a video. And the continuous, the imperfective aspect gets at that sort of ongoing movie clip kind of depiction of an action, whereas the aorist means undefined, and it's that snapshot. So something can be aorist tense, which means it's in the past, and it's just the snapshot. So if I say I jumped, right, you don't know based on jumped if I kept jumping, if I started jumping and then stopped, if I jumped one time or 7 times. You're just getting one snapshot. But if you see a video of me jumping up and down, then you can tell, oh, he jumped, or he was jumping. There are ways to depict that action. And that's part of what's going on when you talk about the imperfect and the aorist. Yes, you're talking about tense. Imperfect and aorist are both in the past, but you also have that aspect where you have the imperfective aspect, which gets at this sort of movie clip depiction of an action, as compared with the aoristic aspect, which is that undefined snapshot Polaroid picture sense of the action. So let's get into the details of the form of the aorist tense. So the aorist, just like the imperfect, has that epsilon prefix. So if you see an epsilon prefix, you automatically know you're narrowing down your verb tense to either an imperfect or an aorist. It's one of those two options, imperfect or aorist. Whenever I see that epsilon prefix, when I see an epsilon prefix, red lights are blinking in my brain. I am looking at an imperfect or an aorist. So then you have to go, okay, I see this epsilon prefix, I'm in an imperfect or an aorist, and then I have to look at the endings and go, oh, okay, which one am I looking at? The sign of the aorist is the sigma alpha. So sa, se, with that movable nu, samen, sate, san. Not that difficult. Sa, se, samen, sati, san. So in the example of pistuo, I believe, in the aorist, the simple snapshot past, I believed, epistusa. You believed, epistusas. He, she, it believed, epistuse, or sen. We believed, epistusamen. Y'all believed, epistusate. They believed, epistusan. So that sa, se, samen, sati, san with the epsilon prefix. Epsilon prefix, I'm looking at an imperfect, or I'm looking at an aorist. Now, again, the aorist tense is undefined, meaning that it provides a snapshot of the action. Think of it, again, like a Polaroid picture, or for those of you who don't know what that is, it's just an Instagram snap, okay? We have the aorist middle. Now, the aorist middle, like the future, the middle is different than the passive, right? So when you talk about the imperfect or you talk about the present, the middle and passive form is the same. In the aorist, the middle is a true middle. But again, just as we saw, you're going to see these aorist middles most commonly on aorist deponent verbs. Okay, so you're not going to see these a lot as actual middles, but if you do see the aorist middle, it's either going to be a deponent or a true middle, not a passive voice. So, elusamein, I loosed myself, or I loosed for myself. You loosed yourself, or you yourself loosed, eluso, elusata, elusamen, elusaste, elusanta. So these are the aorist middle forms. There's also the aorist infinitive. Infinitives are indeclinable verbal nouns. These are verbs that are not limited, hence infinite. They're not limited by person or number, but they're defined by tense. So we have the present infinitive, luein, the present active infinitive, which is a imperfective aspect, to be loosing. And we have the aorist infinitive, to loose, and that's the aorist snapshot. So these are you would translate luein as to loose or loosai as to loose. Their tense in the infinitive is not about when the verb is occurring. It's about the kind of action being described. That is it aoristic, snapshot, Polaroid, or is it imperfective, ongoing, continuous kinds of action? So the infinitive forms of luo that we've seen so far in the present active infinitive, luein, the present middle, luestai, the present passive, luestai. The aorist active, loosai, the aorist middle, loosastai, to loose oneself, loosai, to loose. Okay, so these are the infinitive forms of luo. And again with aorist, because just like we saw with the future, when you have that sigma and you have verbs that end in consonants, sometimes when that consonant and that sigma come into contact, you have our old friend amalgamation. So p beta phi plus the sigma becomes psi, kappa gamma chi plus the sigma becomes xi. The tau delta theta plus the sigma becomes sigma. So there's a few examples here. Croy gives more examples on pages 73 through 74, but pempo, right, it ends in that p plus the sigma becomes a pempsa. So look, you've got the epsilon, you've got your epsilon prefix and the sigma alpha, a pempsa. Blepo becomes a blepsa. Sigma plus the p becomes psi. Grapho, I write, a grapsa, because the phi plus the sigma becomes psi. Keruso, remember keruk, it's got that kappa ending, plus the sigma becomes keruksa, a keruksa. Patho, I persuade, in the epsilon prefix, the theta plus the sigma becomes a pesa. So these are the aorist forms where you have that amalgamation. When a verb ends in a consonant, p beta phi, kappa gamma chi, or tau delta theta, and it combines with that sigma, you have our old friend amalgamation. So those are the forms of the aorist tense. So I hope that what you're seeing here is that this isn't too hard from what you've already seen. You're going to mostly be focused on the aorist active indicative, a pistu sa, sa, se, samen, sati, san. These are the forms of the aorist, and thinking about how they function syntactically. You have, these are snapshots. This is the most common tense that we see in the New Testament, and it's that simple snapshot of a past action. This is an introduction to the aorist active and the aorist middle in the indicative.